Am I wrong for demanding peace at night instead of sleeping in a gas chamber? I'm a 36-year-old woman married to a 41-year-old man. And while our relationship is solid, nights in our apartment have turned into something I genuinely dread because of his complete lack of consideration. Once the lights go out, I usually fall asleep first, and like clockwork he comes to bed later and immediately releases a series of thunderous, eye-watering fumes under the covers with zero attempt to restrain them, ventilate, or remove himself, to the point where I'm gagging, wide awake, and forced to flee the bedroom just to breathe. What makes it worse is that his doctor explicitly told him to cut out certain foods and take medication for the issue, advice he's chosen to ignore entirely, while I go out of my way to leave the room if I so much as feel discomfort because I don't want to subject him to the same thing. He insists it's natural, that marriage means accepting everything. Yet somehow he never behaved this way before we lived together and still manages to control himself everywhere else except the one place I'm trapped and half asleep. And now I'm being made to feel unreasonable for asking him to at least step into another room or make any effort at all. So am I really the villain here for wanting basic respect and a night of uninterrupted sleep? Did I go too far telling my sister to stop controlling our father's grief? After our mother died nearly 6 years ago, our family froze in that moment, especially my younger sister, Mara, who was still in high school while I was already living on my own. Our father, Daniel, centered his entire life around protecting her pain. Even years later, every time he tried to date, Mara would spiral, crying, accusing him of erasing our mom, begging him to stop, and each time he did. Recently, Daniel began seeing a woman named Claire, a divorced teacher with 2 sons, and for the first time he seemed genuinely alive again. When he suggested spending the holidays together, Mara shut it down, claiming the house was her safe place and full of memories that couldn't be shared. Then I learned, through a family chat, that she planned to move back in after college, a plan she'd never mentioned until Claire entered the picture. Frustrated and exhausted, I accused her of using our mother's death to control him and acting as if she were the only one who lost her, while the rest of us were expected to stay frozen forever. Daniel told me to stop. Mara left the chat, and later I was labeled heartless for attacking her grief. Now my father wants me to apologize, but it feels like once again, his happiness is being sacrificed, and I'm the only one willing to say it out loud. Should I keep my child from a wedding after finding out the worst way? I'm a woman in my mid-20s who split from my ex years ago after a long, exhausting relationship that left me doing most of the parenting alone. We share a young daughter, and while we've managed a service-level co-parenting arrangement, our communication has always been strictly limited to necessities. I don't pry into his life, and he rarely volunteers information, something I tolerated until it started affecting our child. He's been with his now fiancée for years, and I didn't even learn she existed through him. Our daughter, barely out of toddlerhood at the time, casually mentioned Daddy's new friend, and that was my introduction. I swallowed my discomfort and stayed civil. Then one day, while scrolling through social media, I was blindsided by glossy photos of an engagement ring and captions celebrating forever. That's how I learned my child's father was getting married. Through someone else's post days earlier. He had told me he couldn't financially support our daughter for a while because he was switching careers. I agreed, trying to be understanding, only to realize soon after that money wasn't too tight for luxury trips and diamond rings. The pattern continued. Less than a day before he was supposed to have our daughter, his mother messaged me saying she would cover some of his parenting time. He later texted that he was busy. I rearranged my entire schedule to stay home, assuming something urgent had come up. A few days later, vacation photos flooded social media. Beaches, cocktails, smiling couple shots. No warning, no conversation, just silence and a mess left for me to clean up. When it was finally his turn to take our daughter again, I confronted him. I told him it wasn't about jealousy or control. It was about respect and communication. Big life changes affect our child, and I deserved to hear about them directly. His response was cold and dismissive. He said his fiancée wouldn't have any legal rights over our daughter, so it wasn't my concern. When I asked whether it mattered that our daughter was gaining a step-parent, or that these milestones shaped her emotional world, he shut down. Shortly after, his fiancée blocked me entirely, which felt like a very loud statement. I wasn't supposed to know, and I definitely wasn't supposed to question it. That was when I made a decision I never thought I'd have to make. I told him our daughter would not attend the wedding. As far as she knows, we already have plans that day. There isn't even a confirmed wedding date anymore. They're now expecting another child, but the damage was already done. I've been the one at every school event, every appointment, every hard night. The thought of watching my daughter walk down an aisle for the first time without me there, having her hair done by someone else, being dressed by someone else, while I find out afterward, felt unbearable. Now I'm being told I'm selfish, that I'm punishing them, that I've ruined their plans. His family says I forced them to delay everything. My friends say I finally set a boundary that should have existed years ago. I feel guilty, But I also feel invisible in a situation where I've always carried the most weight. I'm standing firm, even though it hurts, because this isn't about a wedding. It's about being shut out of my own child's life. Did I go too far after a faith comment at a funeral? At 26, I was standing in a crowded chapel during the funeral of my aunt, who had just lost her second brutal fight with a long illness, when an old acquaintance from work came up to me, offered brief condolences, and then pressed for details about how she died. So through tears I explained the complications and how hard the final months had been, only for her to smile softly and say how grateful she was that nothing like that had ever touched her family because they were blessed, protected, and clearly favored by her God. A comment that felt like a knife twisting while I was already barely holding myself together. And I snapped back that it must be comforting to believe some families are chosen for mercy while others are left to bury their loved ones, which caused an audible stir and drew uncomfortable looks from everyone nearby. Her relatives immediately turned on me, accusing me of attacking someone who was just being kind, with one of them even implying that my reaction was the very reason my family hadn't been spared. And overwhelmed by grief and fury, I told them to leave the service, cutting off contact with everyone who defended her afterward. But now I'm left questioning whether my pain justified my outburst or whether I crossed an unforgivable line in a moment meant for mourning. Was I really wrong for playing solitaire late at night in my own bed? It was a quiet Saturday night, edging toward midnight, and I was finally relaxing after a long, draining week. I was in bed with my laptop resting on my knees, the screen dimmed low, volume muted, and the apartment completely still. No TV, no music, no phone calls, just me, my sleeping pets, and a single calming game of solitaire, the kind where you slowly match tiles and click your way through patterns. I live in an ancient, 3-story house that's been chopped into separate apartments sometime before soundproofing was ever invented. Every creak echoes, every pipe sighs dramatically. I'm in the middle unit, sandwiched between neighbors above and below, so I'm always hyper aware of noise. That's why what happened next felt unreal. Out of nowhere, angry shouting blasted up through the floor. Someone below me yelled, "Can you do this tomorrow?" Followed by, "You've had all day. Why now?" Then it escalated into full-on swearing. Before I could even process what was happening, they started slamming on the ceiling, hard, like I was throwing a midnight rave instead of quietly clicking carts. My heart started pounding. I felt embarrassed, rattled, and honestly a little scared. I immediately closed my laptop, abandoning my unfinished game, and sat there in the dark listening to the silence settle back in. I hadn't even finished matching the dragon tiles. What makes this worse is that I've never spoken to these downstairs neighbors in real life. Not once. The only interaction we've ever had is them yelling through the ceiling. Meanwhile, the neighbors above me, who live directly over my bedroom and whom I've talked to before, have never complained or hinted that I'm noisy. Not even once. Now I'm stuck wondering if the gentle clicking of a trackpad while playing solitaire really counts as unacceptable noise, or if I was just aggressively shut down for daring to exist quietly after 11 p.m. Was I actually being inconsiderate, or did I get bullied into silence for playing a calm puzzle game in my own bed? Was I wrong to disappear on my birthday after learning the surprise wasn't really for me? I've never enjoyed big birthday productions and everyone close to me knows I prefer something quiet. But despite repeatedly saying this, my sister Lena, who thrives on grand gestures, started acting suspicious in the weeks leading up to my birthday, dodging questions and teasing plans I explicitly asked her not to make. The night before, a friend accidentally revealed there was a full-blown party planned at our parents' house with extended family, co-workers, and, to my shock, my ex, whom I broke up with only weeks earlier after a painful ending and have clearly asked to avoid entirely. When I confronted Lena, she admitted the party wasn't just for my birthday at all but a calculated attempt to force a reunion, saying it would be good for everyone and that I'd eventually thank her, even accusing me of being ungrateful and dramatic for objecting. Feeling blindsided and furious at the idea of being ambushed into emotional reconciliation on my own birthday, I turned off my phone the next day and spent it quietly with a close friend instead, only to return to a flood of angry messages accusing me of humiliating my sister and ruining something she claims was done from the heart, leaving me wondering if I was truly wrong for choosing my own peace over a party that was never really about me in the first place. Am I selfish for choosing my career over becoming my brother's full-time carer? I'm a 23-year-old woman who just finished university and finally landed a competitive entry-level job in marketing with a major tech company, the kind of opportunity that only comes once if you're lucky. My younger brother, Evan, is 19 and has a genetic disability. He's bright, affectionate, loves comic books, and can hold conversations, but he also needs daily supervision, help with routines, and careful management of a heart condition. Growing up, I was the default caregiver. From my early teens onward, I handled pickups, medications, meltdowns, bedtime routines, and crisis moments while my parents worked and my older sister moved out and focused on her own life. I missed social events, clubs, and opportunities because I was constantly reminded that Evan trusted me most and needed me more than anyone else. I did it without complaint because I love him. Right as I was preparing to start my new job, my brother's day program lost funding and cut hours, leaving a gap in his care. At a family lunch, my parents blindsided me and told me they expected me to quit, or at least indefinitely defer my job to stay home with Evan during the day. They framed it as a temporary sacrifice and a moral obligation, insisting that strangers couldn't be trusted and that my career could wait. When I asked why my sister couldn't help or why they couldn't adjust work schedules or use savings, I was told she had her own life now and that it was my turn to step up, even though I already had for most of my childhood. When I refused, my father accused me of choosing money over my disabled brother, and my mother cried that I was abandoning the family. That night, the argument escalated so badly that I packed a bag and moved in with a friend. Since then, relatives have been calling me selfish, saying a few months won't hurt my career but losing consistent care could devastate my brother. I feel crushed with guilt because I love him deeply, but I also feel like I've already given up years of my life and this job represents my first real chance at independence. I can't tell if I'm finally setting a healthy boundary, or if I'm failing my family when they need me most. Did I go too far banning family after they erased my wife's past? After my partner and I returned from our first short trip since our newborn twins arrived, we unlocked our home and immediately realized something was wrong. The study was stripped bare, and the two hand-carved hardwood pieces my partner had inherited from her late grandfather, objects she treasured more than anything in the house, were simply gone. Her aunt, whom we'd trusted with a spare key only for emergencies, stood there beaming and announced she'd done us a favor by donating the old, dusty stuff and replacing it with cheap, boxed furniture to give the room a fresh start, as if she hadn't just erased a piece of my partner's history without permission. My partner broke down on the spot, and I told her aunt to leave, demanded the key back, and changed the locks the next day. Now the extended family is flooding us with messages calling me controlling and cruel, accusing me of isolating my partner from her family and punishing a grandmother over just furniture, insisting her intentions were pure, while my partner is still crying over something that can never be replaced. She agrees with the ban, but the pressure and guilt are relentless, and I'm left wondering if protecting my partner and our home makes me heartless, or if this boundary was long overdue. Was I unfair for not changing plans when my friend never said she was struggling? For my birthday, I planned a full-day trip from our small town to a nearby major city with my sister and a close friend, laying out the schedule clearly ahead of time, leaving mid-morning, several hours at a large museum, exploring the city afterward, and returning that evening. I invited her to the museum for free and knew she had diabetes and an old leg injury. So before we even left, I told her I brought extra snacks, both fast-acting and longer-lasting carbs, just in case she needed them, and reminded her she could speak up at any time. We spent hours walking through exhibits, skipped one floor because neither of us was interested, and took breaks where she sat down without complaint. When we finished early, my sister and I openly suggested walking around nearby streets and using the subway to explore, and she didn't object or say she needed food or rest. Even when we repeatedly checked in and stopped for a smoothie and a bagel along the way, she kept one headphone in most of the day and never told us she was struggling. Days later, she blew up at me, saying I didn't warn her about how much walking there would be, that she couldn't prepare properly, and that I left her vulnerable. Despite the original plan involving hours on our feet, despite us checking in constantly, and despite the fact we were surrounded by food options the entire time, now she's framing it as if I was careless with her health. And I'm stuck wondering if I genuinely failed her, or if she's angry because she didn't speak up and wants someone else to blame. Am I supposed to justify every word because of my diagnosis? I'm 28 and was diagnosed with narcissistic personality disorder at 16. Something I've worked on in therapy for years by choice. I was not a good person in high school. I've owned that, apologized where I could, and I actively work on correcting harmful behavior. I recently joined a new, small friend group, and after I felt safe enough to share my diagnosis, one friend, Ria, started questioning nearly everything I said. It wasn't subtle. If I empathized with an upset friend, she'd ask if I genuinely cared or was performing empathy. If I complimented her outfit, she'd ask if it was my real opinion or if I was scoring points. When I congratulated her on a promotion, she asked if I was implying she hadn't been confident before. Almost every interaction ended with some version of, "Is that you talking?" or "the disorder?" I asked her to stop. Other friends asked her to stop. She dismissed it as just checking, while I was left overanalyzing every sentence I spoke. The final straw came during a pregame at my place when someone canceled plans last minute and I said I felt frustrated because it happens often and feels disrespectful. Ria immediately said, "But are you reasonably upset? Or is the disorder feeling entitled to other people's time?" I snapped. I told her that I already questioned myself constantly to avoid hurting people. That I wasn't a case study. And that she was taking years of work and throwing it in my face. I asked her why she even wanted to be around me if she believed every word I said was manipulation. She responded that my reaction proved her point and that I wasn't as healed as I thought. The night ended awkwardly. The group is now split. And some people think I should simply accept extra scrutiny because of my diagnosis. Even though I've already spent years holding myself accountable. Was I wrong for changing my bedroom lock after my roommate crossed too many lines? I moved into a shared apartment in a city after a coworker, Lena, offered me her spare room when I was struggling to find housing. We weren't close, but she seemed kind at first, and I was relieved to have somewhere affordable. That gratitude made me overlook a lot early on. Lena would wander into my room without asking, sit on my bed after walking around barefoot, snack on my food, and use my things like they were communal. When I tried to set boundaries casually, she laughed it off and kept doing it. Over time, it stopped feeling harmless. I started locking my door when I left, but I kept getting this unsettling sense that someone had still been inside. When I asked her directly if she had a spare key, she snapped, accused me of being paranoid, and shut the conversation down. That was the moment I realized I didn't feel safe in my own room anymore. While she was out one evening, I asked a friend to replace the lock on my bedroom door. A few days later, she exploded, flooding my phone with messages about how I'd disrespected her, claiming I needed her permission, and saying building staff were questioning her because of me. When I got home, she yelled that she regretted letting me move in and said I'd be forced out. I went to the building office myself the next day. They told me she already had multiple complaints from past roommates involving intimidation and missing property. They also confirmed I had every right to change the lock on my private room. After that, I filed a formal report. A notice was issued to her almost immediately. And while the apartment is tense now, I finally feel secure. I didn't want conflict. I wanted boundaries. I just didn't expect protecting myself to turn into a full-blown war. Was I wrong for not stepping in when my child was deliberately left out? I'm a parent in my late 30s with 2 daughters. One older and neurotypical and one younger who is autistic. This situation involves my younger child. She struggles a lot socially and, despite ongoing therapy, she can be blunt, disruptive, and unintentionally cruel because she doesn't understand social cues well. At her school, there's a strict rule. If birthday invitations are handed out in class and the whole class is invited, no one can be excluded. Recently, a boy in her class, someone she has a long history of conflict with, was handing out invitations at school. My daughter came home in tears, convinced she was the only child not invited. Her special education teacher contacted me and said the school could intervene since the rule was violated, but I chose not to escalate it. I explained to my daughter that she and this boy don't get along, asked why she even wanted to attend his party, and pointed out how upset she would be if she were forced to invite someone she disliked. She had a meltdown and said it was unfair, but my partner and I agreed that forcing another child to include her wasn't right, even if it hurt. Later, a virtual meeting with the teacher and the boy's parent revealed far more. The boy's parent was confused, explaining that the party was small and only for close friends, not the entire class. When questioned, the boy admitted he had deliberately made it look like everyone was invited and lied to my daughter, telling her she alone was excluded. He said he did it to hurt her because of a serious bullying incident before winter break, one that he never reported because he felt nothing ever happened when my daughter was involved. Hearing this was devastating. I apologized immediately, asked the school to formally document and address my child's behavior, and requested that they not explain the lie to her so I could handle it myself. Now I'm conflicted. Part of me believes shielding her from consequences hasn't helped her learn, and part of me wonders if allowing her to sit with this pain makes me a bad parent instead of a realistic one. Is it wrong to use a name everyone says I stole? I'm in my late 30s and expecting my second child, a baby girl, and what should be a joyful, intimate time has turned into a surprisingly intense family standoff. My spouse and I already have a young son, and this pregnancy has felt special in a different way. Maybe because we're more settled now. Maybe because we know this chapter won't last forever. Months ago, when relatives casually asked if we had names in mind, we shared a short list, not thinking much of it. One name in particular stood out to us. It's timeless, extremely popular, and has been around forever. At the time, it was just a favorite, not a locked-in decision. Then my partner's sibling, who recently had a baby of her own and isn't planning another child anytime soon, pulled us aside and said that this exact name was the one she had always dreamed of using. One day, she explained that she didn't get to choose her own baby's name and that this one was supposed to be for a future daughter. Someday, maybe, she asked us to take it off our list and pick literally anything else, insisting we were taking something meant for her. What she didn't know at first is that this name also belonged to a woman in my family several generations back. Someone I never met but whose name carries quiet emotional weight. When I mentioned it to a close family member on my side, they teared up immediately, which made the name feel suddenly meaningful in a way I hadn't expected. Since then, the situation has exploded. Other relatives have started calling with suggestions, framing them as helpful but clearly trying to steer us away. There are whispered conversations, side comments about being inconsiderate, and subtle implications that I'm selfish for wanting something that someone else claimed, even though nothing was ever official and there's no guarantee she'll ever use it. My spouse is furious on my behalf and has doubled down, saying no one gets to reserve a common name indefinitely or dictate our choices. Especially when this child is arriving soon and hers may never exist still. The constant pressure, guilt, and family politics are wearing on me, and what once felt exciting now feels heavy and conflicted. I can't shake the feeling that sharing our list at all was a mistake. But am I actually wrong for still wanting to use the name despite everyone telling me I shouldn't? Was I wrong for locking away my hobby supplies from my spouse? I'm really into tabletop modeling and spend a lot of my free time printing and painting figurines. So I've set up a dedicated workspace in the basement of our house with specialized tools, paints, and equipment that I've invested a lot of money and time into maintaining. My spouse, Lena, is also into arts and crafts, and while I don't mind sharing some general items, she regularly takes my supplies without asking and never returns them to where they belong. She struggles with attention issues and organization, so I've found my high-end paints left open in random rooms, brushes ruined in sinks, and once even discovered my precision spray tool completely clogged because she used it and walked away without cleaning it, leaving me to spend hours fixing the damage. I've tried repeatedly to talk to her calmly about putting things back or at least letting me know when she borrows something, but nothing ever changes, and she admits she grabs my equipment because she can't keep track of her own materials. After months of frustration and feeling like my boundaries weren't being respected, I finally installed a lock on the cabinet that holds my personal supplies so I could at least rely on my things being usable when I needed them. When she noticed, she became furious and accused me of excluding her and treating our shared home like it wasn't hers. 2. While I argued that I was just protecting items I paid for and maintained after every other approach failed, so am I the asshole for locking my stuff up? Would we be wrong for forcing a house sale to protect our future? My spouse and I recently got married and are both careful planners when it comes to money. We work stable jobs, live below our means, and save aggressively because we want long-term security, especially before starting a family. One major challenge we're facing is my spouse's significant education debt, well over 6 figures, which has become urgent now that she's beginning an intensive training program and large private loan payments have officially started arriving. Several years ago, when her grandfather passed away, he left a home split evenly between my spouse and her older sibling. At the time, my spouse was living hours away for school. During that period, her sibling and their partner effectively took control of the house. They remodeled shared spaces, upgraded appliances, converted rooms for personal use, claimed the largest bedroom, and used additional areas for storage, all without meaningful discussion. When my spouse eventually moved in, she was given a small bedroom and shared access to a single bathroom. Despite owning half the property, once we became serious, we talked openly about finances and agreed that since my spouse would be moving out to live with me, the most reasonable solution was for her sibling to buy out her share of the house. We communicated this clearly last summer and gave them several months to prepare financially. They acknowledged the request and said they needed time. Shortly after, they chose to purchase a newer vehicle they didn't strictly need, which made us question how seriously they were taking the situation. 6 months have passed, and with loan bills now due, we reached out again to push the process forward. Instead of progress, her siblings suggested this should be handled privately between sisters, excluding spouses entirely. That didn't sit right with either of us. Since the financial consequences directly affect our household, we're completely aligned on this and feel it's unreasonable to shut one of us out. Given the lack of movement and the dismissive tone of recent messages, we're now considering taking formal steps. That could include giving proper notice under local law and, if necessary, forcing a sale through legal channels. If it comes to that, we would also pursue compensation tied to exclusive use of the shared property, which could significantly reduce or even eliminate the most pressing debts we're facing. We don't want to disrupt anyone's life unnecessarily, but we also feel we've been patient, clear, and fair. At this point, protecting our financial stability feels unavoidable if nothing changes. Would we be wrong for moving forward with this, even if it forces a major change for them? Surprise birthday or surprise bill? Was I wrong to be upset? I'll change identifying details, but keep the situation the same. For my birthday, 2 close friends planned what they framed as a surprise outing. I was dropped off at a cafe in a nearby city with no idea what was happening, only to find them waiting for me inside. They had arranged a birthday brunch deal that included food and drinks, brought flowers, a small dessert, and a wrapped gift, and afterward we walked to a dessert shop nearby. One of them covered the bill at the restaurant, and the whole day felt like a thoughtful birthday treat that I hadn't been asked to plan or budget. 4. About 2 weeks later, that same friend sent me a payment request for my share of the brunch and dessert. Roughly $50. Without any message or explanation. That's what threw me off. It wasn't about the money itself. I could afford it and would have paid without issue if it had been discussed ahead of time. What bothered me was that this had been presented as a surprise. And in my experience, when someone plans a surprise birthday outing, it usually means either they're covering it or they clearly communicate costs in advance. I brought it up calmly and explained that I was okay paying, but that the surprise charge felt awkward and confusing. She immediately got defensive and said she had simply forgotten to pay for me at the time. That I shouldn't have assumed it was covered. And not expecting that made me ungrateful considering she'd already done a lot by organizing the day, bringing gifts, and traveling to see me. She also said that whether a surprise means it's paid for is subjective and that other people agreed with her. I tried to explain that my discomfort wasn't about wanting more, but about the mismatch between how the day was framed and what happened afterward. To me, planning something without my input and then charging me later felt like offering a gift and then asking to be reimbursed. It left me feeling like she wanted the credit for doing something special without actually following through on what that implied. We talked it out, but she didn't acknowledge any fault or see where I was coming from at all. That's what's still bothering me. It's hard for me to believe she truly doesn't understand why this felt off. Especially since I wasn't rude or demanding. Now I'm stuck wondering if I missed some perspective here, or if I'm justified in feeling uncomfortable about being charged for a birthday surprise I didn't ask for. Was I wrong for feeling humiliated after being forced out of the shower? After a long, exhausting shift, I finally got home to our small, drafty apartment in a cold mountain town and told my partner, Evan, that I was going to take a quick shower before we settled in for the night. The house was freezing because the old heater hadn't been turned on yet, and I was looking forward to those few warm minutes more than anything. I barely had time to rinse before I had shampoo worked into my hair when the bathroom door suddenly flew open. Evan stood there panicked, apologizing over and over, saying he needed the bathroom immediately and that it wasn't optional. I tried to laugh it off at first and told him I just closed the curtain and he could use the toilet. But his tone changed fast. He insisted I had to get out right now, acting like I was being unreasonable for even suggesting otherwise. For context, we've lived together for over 2 years and are generally comfortable with each other. But we still have boundaries. This being a big one. Evan has a digestive condition that makes bathroom emergencies sudden and intense. So I understand that when he has to go, it's urgent. Still, what bothered me was how non-negotiable it became. I ended up stepping out of the shower mid-wash, water dripping off me, shampoo still in my hair, freezing in the hallway while he locked the bathroom door behind him. I stood there shivering, barefoot on cold floors, feeling ridiculous and strangely embarrassed, waiting for him to finish while my hair dried stiff and soapy. It wasn't a massive crisis in the grand scheme of things, but the longer I stood there, the more it sank in how uncomfortable and unnecessary it felt. I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd been treated like an inconvenience instead of a partner. Especially when there were other ways the situation could have been handled with a little more consideration. I keep replaying it in my head and wondering if I'm overreacting, or if it really was an unreasonable thing to ask someone you live with to abandon a shower like that just so you can use the toilet. Why did my closest friend suddenly cut me out of her life? I'm a woman in my late 20s, and for over a decade my closest friend, Lena, and I were inseparable in every sense. Daily calls, shared routines, holidays together, constant plans, the kind of bond everyone joked would outlast marriages. About half a year ago, Lena started dating Evan, and at first I was genuinely excited for her, fully expecting some schedule shifts because of the honeymoon phase. I didn't complain when she began canceling on me, even when it happened repeatedly and always at the last minute. But after months of being pushed aside, I finally told her, gently, that it hurt to feel like I was no longer a priority. She apologized and promised to do better. And for a brief stretch it seemed like things were improving, until I saw online that she'd gone to a tasting event the same weekend she told me she was too overwhelmed to come to a dinner we'd planned weeks earlier. I tried to keep things light when I mentioned it, but she ignored me for days and brushed it off with a vague explanation. I swallowed my feelings again, not wanting to seem needy, until I learned from someone else that she was planning a birthday gathering and I wasn't invited, despite never missing one in all the years we'd been friends. When I finally asked her outright if I'd done something wrong or if she was upset with me, she told me she needed distance and said I'd been too intense, which felt like a slap after all the patience and restraint I'd shown. I asked for clarity. She shut the conversation down, went silent for nearly 2 weeks, and when I sent one last message saying I loved her and wanted to understand what happened, she blocked me entirely. I'm grieving someone who's still alive, replaying every interaction to figure out what I did wrong, and wondering if asking for honesty from the person who once called me family really makes me the villain here. Am I unreasonable for asking my partner to leave so our home doesn't implode? I live with my partner and our 2 kids, an elementary-aged child and a toddler, and lately every evening feels like an endurance test I'm failing in slow motion. I work full-time with brutally early mornings, while my partner is enrolled in an intense academic program that consumes most of her time and energy. The moment my workday ends, I become the default parent on duty, rushing to pick up the kids, juggling dinner, homework, tantrums, baths, pajamas, and bedtime, all while she retreats upstairs to study behind a closed door. On paper it sounds manageable, but the reality is pure chaos because of our youngest the second our toddler realizes her other parent is home but inaccessible. She completely unravels. She screams for her, cries until she's hoarse, invents excuses like suddenly needing the bathroom upstairs or a toy that only exists in the bedroom, and once she gets near that door, she pounds on it like the world is ending. I'm constantly dragging her away, trying to soothe her, trying to stay calm, and failing more often than I want to admit. What breaks me is that when my partner isn't home at all, the toddler accepts it. She still misses her, but she copes. The screaming stops. The evenings are hard but survivable. When my partner is physically present yet emotionally unavailable, everything explodes. The stress builds until I feel like I'm vibrating with it. What makes this feel even more unfair is that my partner has options. She could study nearby with family, or stay on campus, or anywhere else where the kids wouldn't be tortured by the knowledge that she's just upstairs, refusing to open the door. But she insists on studying at home every night, leaving me to manage the emotional fallout alone. Eventually, exhausted and fraying, I told her that if she plans to shut herself away for hours, it would honestly be better for everyone if she studied somewhere else. Because I cannot physically or psychologically keep a toddler from wanting her parent. She was hurt and angry, said I was being unsupportive, and now I'm sitting here racked with guilt, resentment, and bone-deep exhaustion, wondering if I'm truly asking for too much or if I've just become the person expected to absorb all the stress so everyone else can function. Did I go too far protecting a friend's allergy on my birthday? I'm about to turn 18 and planned a small birthday dinner at my house with just my closest friends. Nothing wild, some simple grilling, ordering pizza, and letting people bring food if they wanted, but with no pressure. One of my friends asked if he could bring his new girlfriend, and I agreed since he wasn't even planning to stay long. She offered to make something for the dinner, and I thanked her but told her it wasn't necessary. She insisted anyway. I later created a group chat for everyone attending and sent out the basic details, including one very clear and serious rule. One of my friends has a severe nut allergy, so anything brought needed to be completely nut-free, including avoiding cross-contamination. Everyone acknowledged the message, including the girlfriend, who reacted to it. The night before my party, she casually mentioned what she'd made and sent me a photo. It was a homemade cake that I immediately recognized as one that usually contains nuts. When I asked, she confirmed it did, but said it wasn't much and that the allergic friend could just not eat it. I told her I wasn't comfortable having it in my house at all and asked her not to bring it. She got angry and said she'd already put in a lot of effort, so either the cake comes or she doesn't. I told her then she shouldn't come, because I'd been clear from the start and I wasn't risking my friend's health for a dessert. She accused me of being disrespectful, said she had a right to be there because she was dating my friend. And things escalated fast when her boyfriend called me. He yelled that I was cruel and ungrateful, and I snapped back, saying I didn't care how long the cake took. Nuts were the one thing I explicitly said not to bring. I also said some harsh things in frustration about her ignoring clear instructions. Now they're both skipping the party and telling others I disinvited her after she worked hard on something for me. Most people not attending think I was wrong, while the few who are coming, especially the friend with the allergy, say I did the right thing. With my party happening tomorrow, I'm left wondering if standing firm about safety made me the villain, or if I was right to draw the line even when it blew up friendships. Did I go too far when I confronted a stranger who cut the line? I was at Costco when I realized just after checkout that I'd accidentally grabbed the wrong product. Annoyed but calm, I wheeled my cart over to the customer service counter and took my place behind another shopper who was clearly already waiting. It wasn't busy, but it also wasn't empty, and I expected to be there for a few minutes like everyone else. While I was standing there, a woman suddenly pushed past my cart, physically edging in front of me, and tossed me a casual little wave like we were old friends. Without even apologizing, she said, "I'll be super quick. I just have a question," as if that automatically granted her priority over everyone else. Something in me snapped. I told her bluntly that I didn't care how quick she thought she'd be and that she needed to wait her turn like the rest of us. She immediately looked offended, like I'd committed some huge social crime, and shot back that I was being incredibly rude and aggressive. That reaction only made me angrier. I pointed out that I also had a question and asked her what exactly made hers so important that it justified cutting in front of strangers. The exchange drew a few looks from nearby customers, and she scoffed. muttered under her breath, and stepped back, clearly acting like I was the problem for not letting her get away with it. By the time I got home, the adrenaline had worn off, but I was still irritated. When I told my partner what happened, she agreed the woman was wrong for cutting the line but said I escalated things unnecessarily and shouldn't have sworn or come in so hot. I get that I could have handled it more politely, but at the same time, I'm tired of people acting entitled and expecting everyone else to just accept it quietly. I don't regret standing up for myself, but now I'm stuck wondering whether the way I did it crossed a line and turned me into the asshole. Instead,